Nana Akufo-Addo has just been re-elected president of Ghana. We go live to Accra. Also, 36 countries have now ratified the Africa Free Trade Area. We speak to economist Professor Carlos Lopes. Good evening. I'm Aldrin Sampear, and this is African Perspective. Okay, we start off with this story. The South African Health Minister, Dr. Zweli Mkhize, says the country has now entered the second wave of the COVID-19 infection surge. More than 6,700 people, of new cases rather, have been confirmed today alone. This following several super spreader events across the country. Mkhize has urged citizens to celebrate this season with restraint. South Africa has the highest number of infections on the continent, with nearly 830,000 cases reported to date. 22,000 people have succumbed to the virus.
The criteria was formulated by our scientists and modeling teams. As it stands now, as a country, we now meet all those criteria. It also important for us to highlight that 4 provinces, that being Western Cape, Eastern Cape, KwaZulu-Natal, and Gauteng, are the key drivers of this new wave. Of this criteria, we look at the number of tests done, we look at the positivity rate, we look at the number of positive cases as well as the percentage positive. And then we look at the numbers of people who are admitted, and we look at the numbers of fatalities. All of this together must show an indication of an increase, and this on a week-to-week over a 7-day period. As we compare that, we then conclude that there's an increase.
The African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement takes effect from the 1st of January 2021. Speaking during the AU Summit a few days ago, African Union Chairperson President Cyril Ramaphosa commended African leaders for ensuring that Africa is finally adopting a blueprint that will ensure a smooth trade relations across the continent. The AfCFTA brings together a population of 1.2 billion people into one market.
It was once called a dark continent. It is still emerging from the wounds of colonialism and apartheid. Now the focus is on rebuilding and reclaiming its rightful place on the global stage. Africa is establishing a market of 1.2 billion people with the African Continental Free Trade Area, a proud moment for African leadership.
The commencement of trading under the AfCFTA on the 1st of January 2021 is one of the most significant milestones in the continental integration project.
And women stands to benefit.
The AfCFTA must facilitate greater trade opportunities for women and focus on removing non-tariff barriers to trade.
But hard work lies ahead.
As much progress as we have made, integrating 55 markets will not be easy. It will be difficult. It will be a daunting task. It will take resolute determination decade after decade.
He emphasized the need of dismantling colonial effects.
Africa continues to be trapped in a colonial economic model. This requires that we aggressively implement the AfCFTA as one of the tools for effecting a fundamental structural transformation of Africa's economy and placing Africa on a path of long-term industrial development.
The AU's responsibility is to ensure that Africa is peaceful and prosperous. With the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, this will be achieved. Sophie Mkwena, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Well, with just a couple of days before the Free Trade Area Agreement comes into effect, we're now going to cross live over and speak to Professor Carlos Lopes, who is joining us. Good evening, Professor Carlos, and welcome to African Perspective. Just give us an undertaking or what your perception is. There are just a few days until the 1st of January 2021. Can we really say that the Africa Free Trade Agreement area is ready for implementation?
Well, insofar as the symbolic date of 1st January is concerned, it's basically about us being able to have the level of ratifications that have been attained. It's quite significant, have a certain number of protocols signed, making sure that we negotiate as one from that date, and also kick off a certain number of processes like the payment system that has been put in place for countries in Africa to be able to trade without having to use hard currency from other regions. So a certain number of things will happen, but let's make no mistake, this is not going to be the immediate entering into effect of a complete free trade area, because you will need for that schedules, you will need a certain number of protocols that are not yet completely negotiated. You need to clarify things like the rules of origin, like intellectual property. So it's a very complex undertaking. Negotiations in trade normally take quite a while, and we should not really be super excited about the date itself, but rather we should be about the momentum that is quite forceful, and the steadfast implementation of the agreement is going to tell us whether that momentum is going to be sustained.
Mm-hmm. Speaking about the momentum, it's been since 2012, since the idea was first mooted. 2018, when some countries came on board and there was the agreement back in Kigali. Would you say that the pace of implementation has been severely slow? And also considering that, of course, we have, as some people would say, that when you speak about Africa, we cannot speak about Africa as a country, but rather as a continent which is quite diverse.
Well, it is true that the momentum for the current agreement has been established into 2012, but in fact the negotiations about it started almost 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. And in 2007, a decision was taken that we should move in this direction, but then, things didn't really pick up until the leadership of the African Union. I was very happy to be associated with that process from that period of 2012. There is the period also where we drafted the Africa Agenda 2063. There was quite an impetus to make trade the central force for integration. And I think since then, the pace has been quite remarkable. In fact, if you compare with the European Union, which is probably the most integrated trade area in the world, we can say that they took much longer at the stage where we are to get through the different steps that are going to be sort of consolidated by January 1st. So I would say that we have demonstrated political will, a very strong desire of integration. We never had as many ratifications of any African agreement in such a short period of time. Mm. But, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. So now we'll have to move into the real implementation.
So real implementation, and you're speaking earlier on about integration as well. So you have now 36 countries that have ratified the African Free Trade Area. But what does this really mean when you only have 36 countries that have ratified it, and then on the other end you have Eritrea that is not coming to the party at all?
Well, in fact, you have to look into the trade type of negotiations from the size of trade. And when it comes to Eritrea, it's the only country in Africa that has not signed. The others have signed, but not all of them have ratified so far. Normally, ratifications take some time because they have to go through parliaments. Some countries were under elections, others have conflicts. So it's not abnormal that we only have 36. Actually, it's the opposite. We should be very happy that we have obtained this majority. What really counts in terms of the legal aspects of such an agreement is to have at least half of those who sign ratify. Mm-hmm. We have surpassed that threshold. So we can say that safely the agreement is under implementation, and the countries that have not yet ratified have not demonstrated any hesitation in doing so. It's more a question of being slower than the rest. So I think we are really in the right path. Mm-hmm. And about the diversity of the continent, well, that's probably one of the advantages of having a free trade area. if you want to create value chains, if you want to create possibilities of people trading from one country to another, it's really not very good that all countries produce the same, have the same comparative advantages, have the same locations, have the same sort of elements that will position them in world trade. It's good to have that diversity, and Africa is vast enough to be able to create regional value chains and go in the direction of integration. What we know is that a lot of trade that is already occurring in the continent is done informally. If you just go at a border crossing in Africa, you will see that there is a lot that's not going through customs. So there is a lot of informal trading, and we need to formalize all these exchanges by, basically withdrawing the tariffs and making all of this legal.
Okay, and I just want to quickly go back again to Eritrea, and I know that you say it's probably not that significant, but just the idea that you have one country on the continent that is not part of this free trade area, what signal or message does it send? And also considering that this is the Horn of Africa that we're speaking about.
Well, Eritrea has been very clear that they don't like to join multilateral fora of this type. So it's not specifically about this agreement, it's all agreements of this type. And in fact, when the discussions were taking place politically, a lot of focus and emphasis was put into why Eritrea is the only country that is not signing the agreement. And they themselves felt the need to come forward and say, we don't have anything against the agreement, but give us time, and we'll come when the time is right for us.
Okay, and let's look at then, we have the 10 that have ratified so far, rather we have the 10 that have indicated that they've ratified and submitted the tariffs of offers. What does this mean for us?
It means that, some countries are taking this very seriously, going into the level of detail that is required, that normally it takes a few years for people to actually make their offers, because some of the protocols have not yet been finalized. So a lot of countries will be more on the safe side and waiting for all the major protocols to be firmed up before they make their offerings, because they may make their offerings on goods, but they know that there will be a protocol that will come on services that can affect some of their goods depending on their economic structure. So I think a lot of countries are not necessarily hesitating, but rather playing it safe, that it is much better to make their offerings when you have full knowledge of the spectrum of agreements that are entailed by this free trade area. We have a level of complexity that requires, for countries particularly that don't have that much talent dedicated to trade negotiations, to wait to see how the big players are going to position themselves, and then they follow.
And those big players being one, South Africa and Nigeria as well. So how does the member states at least ensure that these two big players don't become too dominant, or that even the trade negotiations are not skewed to the benefit of these two?
All the studies that have been done, when I was at the Economic Commission for Africa leading it, we did studies, but now they have been confirmed by many other studies done by the African Development Bank, by the World Bank, by the IMF, by all major international organizations, Afrexim Bank, all point in one direction, that in fact every country in Africa is going to benefit from this trade area integration. But some are going to benefit more than others. But the perception is that the ones that already have an industrial capacity, like Egypt, like Nigeria, like South Africa, and because of the size of their market, they are going to be ahead of the game. I would say the ones that are going to be ahead in the game are really the ones that have a strategy for the CFTA. Some countries may be very well endowed for a variety of reasons, but if they don't really take seriously the preparation and the strategy to integrate the rest of the continent, they are going to be in a position where they find that they are not taking the benefits at the same pace as the others. So I think all are likely to benefit. Let's take, for instance, one country that may not have an industrial capacity. It may well be that this country is a very good logistical center. So a country like Djibouti may not export goods, but it can benefit from the free trade area because it's a major port.
Yeah.
So you have different advantages. Not all countries are alike, but all of them can position themselves if they have good strategy to take advantage of this agreement.
So what we've seen in highly contested spaces, and even when we speak, for instance, about military power, we've seen how contentious that issue could be. And the economy itself is also a highly contested space. And I wonder then, these two powers, when you speak about Nigeria and you speak about South Africa, how then do you ensure that, as I pointed out earlier on, that they do not dominate? That they do not, because South Africa, for instance, is always being referred to as the big brother. But how do you make sure that the big brother does not dominate? The big brother does not call the shots every time. And now we even have the Secretariat being from South Africa as well.
Well, the Secretary General, Wamkele Mene, was selected because of his competence. And I think it was a very transparent process. Actually, the panels that selected were not really panels with the presence of South Africans. So I think it's a very good indication of Pan-Africanism and the integration that is already occurring from the political standpoint. I of course, know that some countries have more weight than others when it comes to the political elements, the military elements, geostrategic combined, and also the economic size. But this being said, it's nothing different or new from the undertakings that occur at the African Union, or for the matter in any other union, like the European Union. You will see that there is the so-called Franco-German machine that basically influences the rest of the union. I think in Africa we have just gone through a reform of the African Union that compensates some of the small countries in terms of their participation in the decision-making process in a way that is very fair. So I think there is a quite strong solidarity movement taking place around the discussion on the continental free trade area. It's interesting, for instance, to mention that the champion of this particular subject in the Union was the president of Niger, a small country, and in fact the one that ranks the lowest in human development index of the United Nations in Africa. So you can see that it is really a different spirit from the spirit of I have the might, I occupy, and I decide.
Sure. And just quickly then, looking into the politics, because it is the politics, of course, that has brought us to where we are at the moment, but it's also the politics that could dismantle this entire thing, or even countries deciding to pull out. Is there any way at all to insulate the African Free Trade Area Agreement from the politics that would be happening externally, including whether you find that a country, for instance, that we can speak about the DRC, that the instability in the DRC does not affect the Africa Free Trade Area?
I think we have encouraging signs in the direction of having a certain degree of separation between the hard politics, let's put it that way, and the mechanical and technical aspects of a trade agreement. The first indication is that we have a secretariat that is separate from the African Union central body. That secretariat, even from a location point of view, is in a very different space. It's in Accra, Ghana, not in Addis Ababa. A second indication is that you have a Secretary General that has the mandate to engage the continent on a number of areas. That mandate of the Secretary General has just been reinforced in the last extraordinary summit that took place last week. And finally, I think another encouraging sign is the decision that a certain number of negotiations that were actually occurring under the umbrella of the African Union Commission have now been transferred to this Secretariat. So I think there is a quite clear indication of independence as the number one element that will professionalize this undertaking, and also that will protect Africa from possible disruptions coming from politics.
Okay, and when we come back, we'll have a conversation about how this would affect even the geopolitics of the country, or rather of the continent, including the world as well, but also looking at some of the industries that could offer a great potential for the continent to grow. Doctors in Kenya have held a vigil in honor of their fallen colleagues who succumbed to the COVID-19. The country's medical doctors' unions are accusing the government of failing to protect frontline workers. 13 doctors have died since the pandemic reached their shores. In addition to safety concerns, some doctors have not been paid for several months. Sarakimani has that story.
Statistics from the Ministry of Health indicate that at least 2,700 healthcare workers in Kenya have contracted COVID-19. Out of this, 13 doctors have died and about 28 healthcare workers in total have died in the line of duty. Already, clinical officers and nurses have downed their tools.
When your fellow colleague tells you to save yourselves when you're just so young in this career of medicine, it really makes you put yourself in a reality check of how our health system is in this country and whether we are having a bit of misplaced priorities with how we are allocating our funds with regards to healthcare financing in this country.
Doctors have given the government at least 2 weeks. If they do not meet their grievances, then they are also planning to down their tools. From Nairobi, I am Sarah Kemani. Back to you in studio.
Well, Ghana's Electoral Commission has declared incumbent Nana Akufo-Addo as the winner of Monday's presidential elections. This comes after 5 people were killed in post-election violence related to the delay in the announcement of the results. Large groups of Mahama supporters took to the streets earlier today demanding for the release of the election results. Many believed that their leader gathered enough votes to return to the highest office. The supporters clashed with police. The deaths marred Ghana's record of conducting largely peaceful elections in a turbulent region. Commentators had warned of the risk of violence by partisan groups before the election on Monday. Well, for more on this, now let's go to our SABC correspondent, Nabil Ahmed, who is joining us from the capital, Accra. Good evening and welcome to African Perspective. Are those celebrations that we are seeing there behind you?
Yes, exactly. It's a celebratory mood here at the residence of the incumbent President Nana Akufo-Addo. The party supporters have gathered here to celebrate his victory. The Electoral Commission announced the result a couple of hours ago and declared Nana Akufo-Addo as the winner of the 2020 elections. He actually polled about nearly 54% of nearly 52% actually of the total votes cast, while the closest contender, John Mahama, polled about 47%. It's really an exciting mood here when you look at the noise that's actually in the background. When you hear the noise that's actually in the background, you can see party supporters are excited about this particular victory.
For Ghana, because John Mahama also re-entered the electoral space, trying to make sure that he goes back to the highest office in the land. And when I spoke to him, I think it was last year, he was quite confident that he would secure the majority or the popular vote, but that's not the case.
Well, the former President John Mahama, who is the closest contender, before the Electoral Commission announced the results, actually came out to say that he believes he has won the elections, as at the time the Electoral Commission declared the result, he has not actually yet considered defeat or called the incumbent or the announced winner to congratulate him, and that sends a certain kind of signal that he still does not accept this particular result that the Electoral Commission has announced. Earlier, when I was at the Electoral Commission for the result to be announced, we actually saw the former Attorney General during the John Mahama administration, Marietta Buapon, and the party lawyer, Tony Lita, come to the EC with a petition to be handed to the Electoral Commission, but they were referred to send the petition to the registry. They actually went there and they realized that the registry, there was nobody there. They shared their frustration about the situation and actually left the Electoral Commission. We are unsure if this particular, they will take this particular case to court as it happened in the 2012 elections, where the NPP, which is the current government, took the case to court, which made them go through an 8-month-long, sitting at the Supreme Court until the Supreme Court declared John Mahama as indeed the winner of the 2012 election. So there are some signals that the opposition will send this particular result, will challenge it at the law courts.
Okay, I see there's a locust on just on your shoulder there. I don't know if it's a bad omen or if it's a sign of good luck. But let's speak about the potential of the elections being challenged, because listening into the press briefing from earlier on, the electoral commissioner there, Jean Mensa, saying that there are votes that are still outstanding because there has been a dispute there, but also saying that that dispute that's there won't alter the results or significantly alter the results.
Exactly, that's what the Electoral Commission says. Although there are some outstanding results that are yet to come in, she believes that it will not really make any difference to what they've been able to gather so far, hence going ahead to declare the result. And that's where the problem is, because the opposition party has not considered defeat and is looking at contesting this particular elections. And it's going to be some few days of confusion coming up, because once the opposition feels it stands a chance of winning this election, they would really want every ballot to be counted and tallied so they can know where exactly, how exactly they fared during this contest. And it actually sends not too good a signal out there as to whether this particular election has been free and credible. Mind you, during the 2016 election, the NPP won by a clear margin, and that was undisputed. The opposition, that's the incumbent at that time, John Mahama, accepted defeat. He polled around 44% of the votes that was cast during the 2016 elections, whereas Nana Akufo-Addo polled nearly 54%, and that was a clear margin that put him in the lead. But with this one, the opposition is not too happy about this result and maybe looking at contesting it at the courts.
Is it clear at all why there was this pressure on the Electoral Commission to announce the results, even though there are results from a certain constituency that have not been concluded and there is that dispute? Why rush and go ahead with the announcement of the results? Because even listening to what Jean was saying, she was arguing that the elections were orderly and the elections have been fair.
I didn't get that, but then if you'd want to find out about how peaceful or how the electoral process has gone, well, some of the election observers from the EU actually said the elections has largely been peaceful. But we know that the police released a statement that 5 people have died since the polls was cast. On Monday. 5 people died in about 3 regions in the in the country, and that wasn't a pleasant thing for the country to recall. The country which has prided itself as a leader in democracy would expect that the election should be without any violence, but then there were some pockets of violence in some areas in Ghana, and that led to the shooting of some 5 people who later died. So that is actually a problem at the moment, and the police service says it will try its best to try and thwart any further clashes post this election announcement of this results.
Yeah, okay, so I'm going to ask you the question that I asked you earlier on as well, because it links to what you've just articulated now about the post-election violence and where 5 people have been killed, and that is the pressure. Why is it that the Electoral Commission felt pressured to announce the results and declare the results, and also declare the election orderly and free, even though there are these results that are outstanding from one of the constituencies?
Okay, I think if I got it, you're asking why it took long for the Electoral Commission to announce the results. Well, the Electoral Commission gave a 24-hour deadline to announce the results, which elapsed last night. And they came out and said they couldn't release the results within the 24-hour period because they had some challenges collating some of the results from other parts of the country, and they were waiting for those results to come in. So until those results come in, they wouldn't be able to declare or announce the winner of this election. So we waited till today, and they came out to say that this is the results so far. Even though there are still some other results that have not reached the Electoral Commission, they believe that particular result, even if it comes through, will not make any difference.
Okay, so where you standing now at the moment? It is all celebrations, it's all fanfare, but is that the case across the country, considering that there are those who are supporters of John Mahama who have argued that the elections have not been free and fair? Let me try again. I know that there are celebrations there in the background. So I'm asking that what is the situation like across the country, considering that there has been the post-election violence at this particular time? Have you heard of any instability in the country because of the announcement that has come from the Electoral Commission?
So far, since the election results were declared, it's largely been a jubilation here, especially at the president's residence and also at the party headquarters. We passed through there, and it's largely a jubilatory mood. We've not heard of any issues of incidents or clashes on the side of the opposition party. So we can't really say something has happened until we get any information regarding that.
Okay, so the elections have been declared by the Electoral Commission, and in the absence of any dispute to the elections, what happens next?
Oh, if you could just come again.
Okay, so the elections have been declared by the Electoral Commission. In the absence of any dispute, what happens next?
What happens to the NDC and NPP? Is that what you're asking?
What happens with the inauguration of the president? Okay.
Okay, the inauguration is expected to happen on January 7 next year. That's when the inauguration is expected to happen. But then we can't say for sure if that's really going to happen because the signals that we are picking, the closest contender, John Mahama, has not called the winner as announced by the EC to congratulate him. There are signals that the NDC party led by the former President John Mahama may contest this election. So if that should happen, it's possible that the president will be sworn in on January 7th, but then a legal battle would really happen subsequently.
And we'll have to wait and see how that unfolds. Thank you so much for that. That is Nabil Ahmed there joining us from Accra, where celebrations are underway following the re-election of the president there in Ghana. So when we come back, we're going to be having a conversation focusing on the second wave of the COVID-19 that has been declared by the Minister of Health here in South Africa. What does this mean for the country, but also what does this mean for the continent? Just after this. And welcome back. We continue our discussion on news that South Africa's Health Minister, Dr. Zweli Mkhize, has announced that the country has now entered the second wave of COVID-19, of the COVID-19 upsurge. More than 6,700 new cases were confirmed today. This following several super spreader events across the country. Mkhize has urged citizens to celebrate this season with restraint. South Africa has the highest number of infections on the continent, with nearly 830,000 cases reported today. date. 22,000 people have succumbed to the disease. We are now joined in studio by SABC foreign editor Sophie Mokoena. Let's just start off here, Ms. Sophie, starting off with this announcement. What does this mean for the country?
Well, clearly South Africa will have to work very hard to ensure that they are able to manage this situation. Unfortunately, we are heading towards a festive season, we are heading towards holidays, but also the learners and the students are home. And we know that when they are at home, they tend to have lots of activities. We heard this week when the minister spoke about the spreader events where most of the matriculants who wrote the exams, after completing the exams, they embark on spring, to have their activities around celebrating completing their exams. And unfortunately, those gatherings have been classified as the spreaders of the COVID-19. And unfortunately, with holidays very close now, we're counting few days, we are going to see more activities and gatherings, and therefore we are likely to see more infections. And already you can see, based on the numbers that were announced today, that we have entered the second wave, and it is going to be very difficult for the country to control the infections.
And we've seen as well that the aviation industry, which has also been affected by COVID-19, and looking at some countries on the continent that have opened the gates. What does this mean for those countries on the continent specifically, considering that we are going into the festive season? Companies would be closing down, so those who are foreign nationals would be leaving the country and moving back to their home countries for the festive season.
Well, we knew that when you open borders and you open the airspace, this was going to happen. And that is why the World Health Organization had warned countries that when you start opening up the economy, but also opening up borders and the airspace, you are going to have this problem. And South Africa in particular, you know very well that it is winter in Europe, it is winter in Asia, winter in the entire Northern Hemisphere. And many people tend to visit South Africa, hoping to enjoy the sun and the warmth. And therefore, we are going to see more tourists coming in from other regions, particularly Europe. And therefore, we know that Europe is experiencing a surge as we speak. And therefore, people coming in are likely to export export this disease to South Africa. And therefore, we find ourselves in a situation where we are in a serious challenge. And therefore, it will be up to the health officials to ensure that they tighten the rules, but also the council, the cabinet, they have to ensure that they come up with measures that will help us to manage this situation. You heard about the garden route. Garden route, it is an area that is being visited by foreign tourists, not local tourists. And therefore, you have a situation where you have to find a way how you are going to deal with this. But also locally, we saw when we started being active economically, opening up businesses, trade and all that, liquor in particular, we find a situation where many people are having the activities, and therefore some don't even comply with regulations in terms of numbers of people who can come together either for funerals or for weddings or for any activity. And therefore, it is very difficult. We are going to have a serious problem this December.
Just quickly touch on the vaccine that needs to be procured.
Well, we know that COVAX is a facility whereby member countries are making a commitment in terms of dollars to try and put together money to ensure that they help those companies, scientists who are working on a process to find vaccines, different types of vaccines from different companies. And now South Africa is part of this initiative because our president is the co-chair of COVAX. But what we have to do is to pay our own contribution to this facility. And therefore, we have been given the deadline of the 15th of December to pay. And I spoke to stakeholders who are supposed to help us to be able to pay our own contribution to COVAX. Here I'm talking about Solidarity Fund, Finance or Treasury, and the Department of Health. Tomorrow we'll hear from Solidarity Fund how far are they, because they had promised that they will be able to assist with the deposit, but the rest of the amount must be paid by Treasury and the Department of Health. But we know that when you look at the South African pairs, we have a problem. I mean, the Minister of Finance has emphasized the fact that there's no money. Therefore, it is going to be a difficult one. But we are hoping that before the 15th of December, we will be able to know whether South Africa has paid.
And then we'll start the debate around who gets to be first in line for the vaccine. Thank you so much. And that is Sophie Mukwena, the foreign news editor here at SABC News. The chairperson of the African Union Commission and the United Nations Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, have just concluded the 4th annual conference between the United Nations and the African Union. The two global leaders say they are committed to further developing cooperation between the two bodies to serve the people of Africa.
Today, of the many topics that were discussed, I allow myself to concentrate on two. First, the COVID-19 pandemic. Africa has so far registered more than 2,200,000 cases and over 53,000 deaths. And there is real hope that vaccines, in combination with other public health measures, will help to overcome the pandemic. But I reiterate my call for a COVID-19 vaccine to be a global public good available to everyone, everywhere, and particularly available in Africa. Most African countries lack the financing to adequately respond to the crisis, due in part to declining demand and prices of their commodity exports. Once again, I appeal for a bold and coordinated international approach on debt relief efforts for African countries, including, where appropriate, debt cancellation, and the meaningful increase in the financial support to African countries to provide the necessary liquidity and to finance the recovery. Second, we also discussed peace and security challenges. The United Nations strongly supports the flagship initiative of the African Union on silencing the guns in Africa. And my appeal for a global ceasefire is perfectly in line with the Silencing the Guns initiative. We are working closely together, notably in the Central African Republic, Somalia, South Sudan, Sudan, and we have seen progress recently in Libya. And we are also coordinating preventive diplomatic efforts with ECOWAS and the other regional economic communities in countries holding elections, and exploring further advances in our calls for a global ceasefire. At the same time, I want to reaffirm my total commitment to do everything possible in order to obtain from the Security Council an agreement that peace-enforcing operations and counter-terrorism operations led by the African Union must have mandates under Chapter 7 and must have simultaneously financing through assessed contributions. When we see the situation today in the Sahel, it is clear that the G5 Sahel would be in a much better situation if it would have a Chapter 7 mandate and assessed contributions, allowing to fight much more effectively the terrorist organizations that have started in Mali and then spread to Niger and Burkina Faso, and now are starting to threaten even the countries of the African coast. I understand that at the present moment, you ladies and gentlemen of the press are particularly concerned with Ethiopia. Indeed, in our discussions today, we highlighted the importance of a peaceful Ethiopia for the prosperity of its people and the Horn of Africa region. And I reiterate the full support of the United Nations to the African Union initiative and the work of the three envoys mandated by President Ramaphosa as chair of the African Union. Our immediate priority is the well-being of the people of Tigray and ensuring those in need urgently receive humanitarian assistance. And we are mobilizing for that purpose the full capacities of the United Nations. Once again, I wish to insist on unfettered access of humanitarian assistance, the swift resumption of the rule of law in a secure environment and in full respect for human rights, paving the way for a true and lasting reconciliation. And together with our African Union partner and others in the region, we stand ready to provide full support to Ethiopian-led initiatives to encourage inclusive dialogue and foster reconciliation. In conclusion, I want to reaffirm our strong commitment of the African Union and the United Nations to keep working closely together to support peace, security, sustainable development and human rights across the continent, and I thank you.
And we've come to the end of this evening's program. Thank you so much for watching African Perspective with me, Aldrin Sampear. From me and the rest of the team, a very good night. Enjoy the rest of your evening. And please remember to adhere to those COVID-19 protocols. Wash those hands and make sure that you wear your mask and take care of those around you. Goodbye.